If you're considering upgrading to the brand new Sony FX30 and you're coming from a camera like the Sony a7 III, maybe even the ZV-E10, or it could be even something like the Sony a7C, you're going to need to upgrade your accessories because this camera can do a lot of stuff that you probably aren't prepared to handle just yet until you get some of these accessories. So let's dive in. First on the list is going to be faster SD cards, and not just faster SD cards in terms of speed, but you want to make sure you have the right quality card. Now, most people upgrade their SD cards thinking I'm going from a 64 gigabyte card to 128 or 256 gigabyte card. We're not talking the capacity, like how much it can hold. We need to actually update to a better quality card. And most of the cards that you're going to use for like the ZV-1, ZV-E10, even something like the A7C, it takes what's called a UHS-1 card, and we need to upgrade to a UHS-2 card. And yes, the Sony FX30 can take the CF Express Type A cards, but unless you're going to use some of the actual higher 10-bit modes on the camera, you don't necessarily have to get the CF Express Type A cards. You can still use the UHS-2 SD cards. Now, if you're already using like the SanDisk Extreme or SanDisk Extreme Pro cards that I've recommended on the channel, and you're at the 128 or even 256 gigabyte capacity cards, then you probably can use some of the base level 10-bit files, maybe not the 422, but some of the 420 bit rates on the camera, and you can actually use it. You just won't be able to get some of those higher bit rates. I would recommend either the pro grade UHS-2 cards or the SanDisk ones. There are some other brands out there that are pretty cool. I've seen my buddy Doc Rock use some of the Kingston UHS-2 cards, so those are the ones I would probably stick to. I'm probably looking to go the pro grade route and the SanDisk Extreme route, but they've been, to my understanding, pretty solid across the board with creators that I know that have used those cards. The second thing you're going to need is better power options for your camera. You're looking at a camera that now takes the Sony Z batteries and not the FW50 batteries, that if you're coming from one of the A6000 series cameras or the ZV-E10, you've been using the FW50 batteries. But there's actually two other options to consider other than just like USB-C, a Sony AC adapter or something like that, which if you're going to use one, don't cheap out. Actually get a reliable one. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to be pushing close to $2,000 for a camera, plus that on top of lenses and SD cards and all of that, and then cheap out when it comes to a power source that literally can break your camera. It is not worth it. Ask me how I know. Check into looking into the D-Tab options where you're able to use something like with a monitor and power it based off some of those larger NPF batteries that Sony has. So this will allow you to completely bypass not having to switch batteries at all if you're doing like some kind of run and gun setup. That way you're able to use your camera in a myriad of situations. And even if you're doing stuff like this, it just means not having to look for an outlet or have to worry about if you're draining the battery life, because those run for hours at a time. The third thing that you want to pick up is making sure you're getting some full-size HDMI cables. And I mean full-size HDMI to full-size HDMI. It doesn't make sense to go into the adapter game because it honestly is just better to use a cable-to-cable situation where the ends are what they actually should be, because every new point or connection when you're connecting up cables is just a new point of failure, so it's not worth it. The fourth thing you're going to want to pick up is some extra and reliable capture cards, or looking to probably invest into ATEM Mini Pro, not the regular ATEM Mini, and I'll share a little bit of why in a second. Now, I like to use just the regular Camlink 4Ks because those give me accurate color reproduction of what I'm actually seeing on my camera versus those cheapo Cant links, but it's just the reliability. There's no quality control on those, and I don't want to be doing something important and all of a sudden that thing gives out or it overheats or whatever. But if you don't want to use a bunch of different cam links and you want to kind of offload some of that to this ATEM Mini Pro, you can invest in something like that. And I personally love to use the cam links in addition to Ecamm Live because most of my scenes and everything else that I'm using is already based on that specific camera and that angle, and it's locked into a specific scene, so I don't have to do any camera switching while I'm actively switching to a certain scene. To put that in a perspective, if we're doing like a angle where we have the speaker and we have somebody asking a question, those angles are already set. I don't have to switch and pick between one. When I'm using Ecamm Live, Ecamm only sees one camera source, and that's just the ATEM Mini Pro. It doesn't know which one is specific or which camera angle because you're doing that from that set device. Now, I love Ecamm because it's amazing, and like I said, once I set it, I forget it, and I don't have to think twice while I'm actively doing any kind of video work or I'm producing my own podcast or live streams or whatever. One of the best things I could have done when I was still using Windows-based machines is upgrade the RAM in the computer. Now, it may not always be necessary depending on how powerful of a computer that you already have, but 10-bit footage is something else. And we saw that when we started using the A7 IV for video, and just really having to develop a workflow for 10-bit that works for us. But that means that everybody involved in this equation needs to have a computer that can handle those files. And sometimes if it's just been a while since you've updated your computer, it would just be wise to go ahead, especially like if you're a Mac user or something and you can't update internal components or what have you, it just makes sense to get something like one of the newer Mac minis that tend to work really good when you're handling those larger files, and on top of that, the 10-bit files. This 6th thing is going to be something that you might think you have enough to deal with what you need to right now, and you haven't been using 10-bit footage. I'm gonna tell you right now, you probably don't. And that is getting some external hard drives, some SSDs, not HDDs, which is with the spinning disk. You need SSDs that don't have the spinning disk and they're much faster, or get something like a RAID system or something like that. You don't have to shoot everything at 10-bit, but just having larger bitrate files in general, like some of the Canon users have been experiencing recently, your file sizes are still bigger and the quality is still nice. So you're gonna wanna get a better solution. What you choose is probably up to you, but at least start with an SSD, because I work with too many clients where we get on these consultation calls and I tell them to share their screen and it looks like a disaster. And before I knew it, they're apologizing or telling me flat out before I even say anything, "Don't judge me, Diana, mind your business." And I'm like, I ain't said nothing. So that's your business between you and your savior. But far as we're concerned in this house, we will use SSDs. The 7th thing on the list of things that you're going to need is going to be better card readers. It makes no difference to get SSD drives or any of the rest if it's taking you forever to transfer the footage from your card to your computer. This is why I recommend stuff that makes more sense as you're upgrading along the way, instead of just using stuff that comes in those dummy I gotcha kits on Amazon, versus actually investing stuff that makes sense for your video workflows. Now, Sony have some surprises coming up with a brand new ZV camera. I'm predicting maybe not at the end of this year, but at the beginning of next year or something, where we get a new A7C Mark II or something thereabout. And then they have like an A7R Mark 5 or 6, whatever number that they're on, that's more photo based. But we have some other cameras that are coming out, and if the bitrate is even higher, all of the stuff we still talked about in this video will still be relevant for you. You may not have to maybe get UHS 2 cards, but all this extra other stuff is probably going to be more relevant. But we will be discussing all of the new cameras that are coming, minus those for photography, but anything else, we'll probably be covering it here on the channel. So let me know down in the comments, what are some questions that you have about upgrading your gear to sometimes a better camera, or choosing between a couple options. Let me know down in the comments below. But if you want to see the A7 IV versus the Sony FX30 comparison that we did, also make sure you check out the video on the screen. You're going to enjoy it. I know you will.